kindly separated by nature and a wide ocean from the exterminating havoc of 1/4 of the globe, too high-minded to endure the degradations of the others, possessing a chosen country, with room enough for our descendants to the 1,000th and 1,000th generation. Thomas Jefferson, First Inaugural Address. A land flowing with milk and honey, and they came in and possessed it. But they obeyed not thy voice, neither walked in thy law. They have done nothing of all that thou commandest them to do. Therefore thou hast caused all this evil to come upon them. Jeremiah 32, verses 22 and 23. Chosen Country. Chapter 1. The best people you could possibly imagine. It was snowing the night I got to the refuge. It had snowed for almost the entire drive from Portland, and it was only with some difficulty and by the use of tire chains that I'd made it over Mount Hood and through the desert. The drive to Burns, where I checked into what the clerk told me was the last room at the local Days Inn, had taken 8 hours, which is not so much longer than it takes to drive in any direction from the town to a city of any size. By measure of distance from an interstate, it is the remotest corner of the lower 48. The snow was 6 inches deep on the streets and falling fast, and there were hardly any cars on the road aside from deputies' cruisers, bearing the markings of counties from all across Oregon. These reinforcements, and the riot of rented SUVs in the parking lot at the Days Inn, were the only indication that the little town had become the host of an insurrection, suddenly one of the biggest news stories in the world. The dingy Thai restaurant on the silent main drag was closed, with a sign in the window like something out of a Western, reading, "Sorry, gone to Bend for supplies." I was in bad need of a hamburger, a few beers, and bed before midnight. But before I'd managed to eat or even set foot in my motel room, I'd gotten a text from my mom, who was watching CNN. "James," she said, "they're moving all kinds of bulldozers and things out there, and it sounds crazy." She asked me to stay in for the night. I hadn't had any service since I hit the mountains and had no idea what was happening. But on the strength of her worry, I immediately pulled out my Atlas of Oregon and set off on the 30-mile drive down State Route 205. In the snowstorm and the dark, the road was almost indistinguishable from the flat sage rangeland, which in turn was entirely indistinguishable from the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge itself, which I would never have been able to find if it weren't for the dozens of news trucks idling on a little rise at the entrance to the refuge headquarters. I parked, shook out a cigarette, and wandered into the halogen-lit portion of the snowstorm. Lavoy Finicum, who had fashioned himself a spokesman for what was going on, was sitting on a camp chair under a tarp with a cowboy hat on his head and a rifle across his knees, having just finished giving the live interview that would make him famous. "They're not going to just come up to a guy holding a rifle and put cuffs on him," he had said. And when asked what exactly he meant by that, he went on, "I have been raised in the country all my life. I love dearly to feel the wind on my face, to see the sun rise, to see the moon in the night. I have no intention of spending any of my days in a concrete box." The message that the occupiers were ready to die before being arrested was reported in papers all over the world. We greeted each other with a nod. Past him was Jason Patrick, who was on the phone and smoking a cigarette. I waved to him, and he recognized me and waved back, indicating by sign language that he'd catch up with me when his call was done. He was wearing, as he always did, apparently even in the cold of a desert snowstorm, a cheap and oversized suit jacket with a baggy blue button-front shirt and khakis. He had salt-and-pepper hair to match a salt-and-pepper beard and bore a plausible enough resemblance to a much thicker George Clooney that, during the standoff, Clooney became his radio call sign. Eventually, it just became his name. He smoked constantly. A friend of mine who knows him once described him as the smokingest dude on the whole planet. It's hard to imagine what he must have done during his various stints in jail. "Hey, man," he said, and lit another cigarette. We caught up for a few seconds before my phone rang. It was a friend of his and a friendly acquaintance of mine named Brandon Rapola, a giant Guamanian.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?